Afternoon, listeners. Michael and Michael are back again.
Hi. Hi.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the history of corporate social responsibility, how it began, what the initial development was of it, and how it's come into being part of nearly every company's mission statement and philosophy today. Corporate social responsibility first began in the 1960s and 70s, and at first people had the idea that it was going to be the three Ps, people, planet, and profit. And the idea was that in long-term business, planning was needed to include planning and caring for the company's employees as well. Prior to that, companies didn't really care too much about employees. It was almost like military service where you were a GI, it was just government issue, and there'd always be somebody to take your place. But then kind of a sense of well-being for the employees took over, and companies started to develop this. Main idea was that a business had a responsibility and an obligation to care about their surroundings as well, not only for the internal part of the company, but the external, talking about the neighborhood and the community and so on. And doing this could translate into long-term growth and success. That's the idea. Whether it did or not remains to be seen.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You know, in the 60s and 70s in America, you could say it was the golden age of work. It was a time when workers' rights were on the upswing, union membership was very, very high, and people began to realize that we had created in our nation a business model which was a rising tide lifting all boats. And through that, workers began to demand that the companies and the corporations for whom they worked took better care of the employees, as well as the community and our environment, etc. And what transpired then was, and we talked about this in an earlier segment, a kind of strategic differentiation where somebody got the bright idea that by allowing consumers to see what this corporation or company was doing good for their employees, for their community, for their country, for the environment, etc., that would enhance consumers to purchase their products.
And feeding off of that came the word transparency. Right? Transparency was to allow people outside of the company, normal consumers like you and me, and all the others, to see how a company operates and see what they give back to not only their employees but to the consumers as well, because a company or a business entity will not survive if it doesn't have consumers, right? People need to purchase the product or the service, and they need to feel good about what they buy, and they have to feel that the employees are well taken care of as well. I think this is natural now, but maybe in the 60s when this first started, this wasn't the norm at all.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Don't forget that labor rights is a relatively new idea. Coming out of the, industrialization is a new idea. Maybe it's 150 years old. And prior to that, there were no workers' rights whatsoever. And with the growth of, the labor movement in America mostly, and subsequently throughout the globe, CSR, that is corporate social responsibility, became even more than transparency. People would use, businesses would use it as a way to entice consumers, customers to buy their products, saying, hey, we share your values. And it was through that kind of like a marketing campaign that people, that is business planners, were suggesting, hey, if we are seen to care about our people, if we are seen to care about our nation, care about our environment, once again, this was the 60s and 70s, don't forget, in America, consumers are going to relate to that, and they're going to know, wink, wink, that we share their values and that we're all part of the same team. And then that will translate into increased profits, increased shareholder value, etc.
But on the flip side of that, when we talk about corporate social responsibility, we also, as a business, we need to pay attention to our shareholders. People who have invested in the company expect to receive some kind of return on their investment. And if we spend a lot of time in the corporate social responsibility realm, trying to be do-gooders for everybody, that maybe we will lose focus of operating our business, which is to make a profit. Our shareholders need to get a return on their investment, and once they get a decent investment, that's going to attract more shareholders, which will generate more profit. Now, can we still say we practice corporate social responsibility if all we are doing is trying to generate profit at the expense of whomever or whatever? I mean, this is kind of a dilemma sometimes, and you have to find kind of a balance between profit and being a do-gooder.
No, you're absolutely right, Mike. And the thing with this is, don't forget, shareholders don't want some remuneration. They don't want some profit. They want every single last penny of profit that the corporation can possibly generate. And that's where we begin to see a conflict between corporate social responsibility and shareholder value. Well, people say, yes, Mike, that's true, but through this showing our consumers that we are one of them and we relate to them and they relate to us, they will buy more of our goods and that will increase our profits. However, this remains unquantifiable for the most part. Sure, it may work for some corporations. Strictly speaking, corporations have only one goal, and that is to make money, and that's it. So if you're spending money on another kind of program and you're not able to show in a quantifiable way that this is actually increasing the bottom line rather than taking away from it, that is outside the charter of a corporation. It's actually illegal.
Well, I can't speak to the legal aspects, but I agree with you for the most part that how do you measure how good your corporate social responsibility ideal is in relation to profits? And we'll leave that question for our listeners to think about and ponder as they go make their next purchase somewhere. Now we have two questions that we want to go ahead and ask our audience related to the conversation that Michael and I just had. Michael, please go ahead.
Okay, question one. Speaking of corporate social responsibility, its birth in the 1960s and 70s in the United States, do you think that corporate social responsibility is mere window dressing? Or do you think that it is really a way for corporations to make themselves more valuable?
Okay, I won't say anything because I have my own ideas on that. But my question
I see.
would be related to when corporate social responsibility was first initiated or created in the 60s and 70s.
Yes.
There were three factors that applied to it. What were those three factors? And I will give you a hint. Each word begins with the letter P. Okay? And that's it. We're going to wrap it up right now. Hope you enjoyed our conversation. Hope it was stimulating for you and that you learned something about corporate social responsibility. Thank you very much for this segment.
Thank you.